Hey everybody, welcome to the Patreon exclusive Meet the Maker. This is the very first Meet the Maker for 2020 in a little bit of a new format that we're going with, that we have our two live Fridays each month, but then we also do two pre-recorded live streams throughout the month. Sometimes it may be more than that in a month because these are pre-recorded for future release. This week we have Caleb Kraft from Make Community, or formerly known as Make Magazine. So Caleb is a all-around maker that I've been following for a little while, been subscribed to on YouTube, and Caleb kind of has that same encouragement, I guess, or interest, you could say, that I have with making, where we're interested in all forms of making. And what I get from Caleb, and he can answer this, tell us if this is how he is, but he seems to always like to look at different avenues of making, whether it's 3D printing, laser cutting, woodworking, metalworking. I know he's been posting on social media here as of late, engraving small metal objects like coins and brass plates and stuff. He has some stuff on Instagram, I think this week, of some brass stock that he did hand engraving on, or hand carving. I'm not sure exactly what the term is. Caleb can tell us that in a little bit. But Caleb's just kind of an all-around maker. And you may have seen him before on other 3D printing channels. Caleb made a high five glove for Joel, Joel Telling, the 3D printing nerd, that Joel wore around New York Maker Faire to count the number of high fives that Joel was given at New York Maker Faire. And of course, you've seen his face if you followed Make Magazine's YouTube channel, and now Make. And Caleb, is it Make or Make Community? What is the proper way to say it?
Well, it used to be Maker Media.
Okay.
And then it changed to Make Community. But we still have Make Magazine and Maker Faire. That hasn't changed.
Okay, so that's all. So when I use all that terminology, I'm still right.
yeah, you're still right. It's still
Right.
Make Magazine and Maker Faire. It's just the parent company. Instead of Maker Media, now it's Make Community.
Okay. So there's that clarification on that for when I screw it up again later on in the interview. But yeah, so you've seen Caleb around Make. He is one of the editors, and I'll let him tell you everything about that during his introduction. So without further ado, let's go ahead and let Ryan introduce himself. Ryan's on to co-host with me.
I'm a co-host now, moving up in the world. How's it going, everybody? I'm Geek Tech. You can find me essentially everywhere as Geek Tech, and I'm going to be here to ask questions to Caleb and help keep Matt on track.
So for anybody who sees this after we record it, if you would like to join into these live streams in the chat room, and actually get to see us record these live, which you get to see all my antics ahead of time when I screw up and click the wrong button. Caleb and Ryan had to sit through me fixing that. If you would like to be a part of this and be interactive, be able to ask the Meet the Maker guests questions, if you sign up on patreon.com/howidoit, which is my Patreon for How I Do It and F3D PCH. The money that is made on there actually goes to pay for the F3D PCH website, the podcast for the audio upload, audio only version of this that will get uploaded to SoundCloud, pays for that service, as well as pays for our streaming services, and hopefully in the future will fund some possible future giveaways that we'll be doing on throughout the streams. So that's what you're doing by becoming a patron, is helping to support the costs of operating the Friday night hangouts. So without further ado, Caleb, go ahead and tell everybody a little bit about yourself, who you are and where you come from.
So I'm Caleb Kraft. I'm senior editor for Make, which means, Make Magazine and Maker Faire. Been with them, I guess 5 years now, maybe more. Before that, I was at Hackaday. If any of you are familiar with Hackaday, if you want to find me, I'm all over the place, man. If you just Google my name, Caleb with a C, Kraft with a K, you will find me. I use my real name everywhere. I don't use a nickname. So you'll find me on YouTube and Instagram and stuff. And then, you know, you were mentioning earlier that you've seen, Ryan, you were mentioning you've seen some of my videos. A lot of my stuff is actually not on my personal channel. If you look through Make's old stuff and even Hackaday's old stuff, that's where a lot of people recognize me from. I've been making stuff and part of the community for, 10 years now, actively writing about people making stuff.
So, Caleb, going right into that, kind of when did you start to consider yourself a maker or realize that you had a passion for making?
Well, the term maker didn't really cross my mind until after I was working at Hackaday, and I thought it was silly. Make Magazine was around and they were calling everybody makers. And then my first gut reaction was kind of like, why do we need a new label for this thing, right? It's something
Right.
humans have done forever. But it really grew on me. At first I didn't like maker spaces. I thought it was too nice. I thought hacker spaces was edgier and cooler, but the more I got out into the community and the more I saw how the word hacker would kind of preclude the general public from participating because they found it intimidating, or you didn't want to like drop your kids off at a place called a hacker space. You know what I mean? The more it grew on me. So I would say I started calling myself a maker long after I started actually making things. I've kind of always tinkered with stuff, my whole life.
Right. What led you to, obviously you've done journalism for Make and for Hackaday. I assume you did that for him as well there.
Mm-hmm.
What led you towards that style, the maker hacker side of things for journalism? Is that something that you had your intentions on when you started, or sight set on when you started, or?
Oh no. I don't have a journalism background. I've just always been able to write okay. I wouldn't say I'm a great writer, but I'm okay, and I'm fast, and most importantly, I'm obsessive. And for some reason, back in the early days, right after Hackaday started in 2005, I found it, and it just hooked me. Just to the idea of sharing these interesting things that other people would get a kick out of seeing hooked me. I was an IT administrator in 2008 or so, and I was horrible at it and bored with my job. So I started writing for Hackaday, and just loved it. I absolutely loved it.
What kind of things did you do prior to really being involved in or visible in the maker like Hackaday hacker space? What's kind of some of your interests that you had years ago growing up, young adult? What kind of tinkering did you do back then?
Oh boy. I was in orchestra. I played violin since I was 4 years old and switched to bass in junior high. And so I stopped taking art classes in junior high. Didn't have any during high school, didn't have shop. And I kind of didn't think I could do that stuff, but I always kind of like had a tendency to take stuff apart at home and get curious about it, take it apart, and maybe I'd like haphazardly nail some wood together in our garage. So I don't think that I would have considered myself somebody who built things until, college or later, even though I always kind of took stuff apart. That was not something you connected the two,
Right.
I just thought kids took stuff apart, right? Hackaday kind of changed that though, because, you know, the projects that I saw where, you know, somebody would take apart a toaster and then put a shim in there to make an image, and then your toast would have an image on it. And that kind of changed my mind about things and got me more excited. And that would have been, you know, 2005, 2006, 2007, somewhere in there. And as far as my career goes, man, I've been all over the place. When I was in college at the local community college, I ended up teaching there at the same time, teaching 3D animation and multimedia design with, let's see, the 3D animation was 3D Studio Max, and multimedia design was with Macromedia Director. For any of you guys who remember that, that was kind of the big version of what Flash was, like the more serious version. And I was teaching video editing back then, you know, introduction to video editing, nothing fancy. I got out of there and went and lived in Portugal for a year teaching 3D animation. I came back and ended up, I've been a photographer for an exotic car dealership. I've done web development in PHP and MySQL. I owned a LAN center, like a computer LAN center with, you know, 30 machines all networked together with tournaments and stuff like that. I've done a lot of stuff. I've been all over the place, but nothing really felt like I could settle into it like this current gig that I have. Yeah. You know, I work from home. I bounce around between making stuff and writing about making stuff and traveling, and I've been able to stick with it the longest of anything, I think.
You get, it sounds like everything in your past leading up to this was a variety. Like you had some IT things. You said about the having a running LANs and stuff, for like gaming and LAN parties type deal. You know, you had the IT side of things, you had the creative photography side of things. It sounds like everything kind of was just leading up to where you're at now, where you've now got that variety to an extent.
Oh yeah.
So what kind of things are you interested in? Like what types of craft make things is interesting to you at this point?
You know, I'm interested in two things mainly. One, and this is the reason my job is so wonderful, I'm interested in other people's passion. Like if I see somebody really excited about something, I can't help it. I get excited by proxy. Like, and that helps because then I can write about it without burning out, right? So, you know, I go to maker fairs and I get so excited to see people excited about things, and it revitalizes me and allows me to actually do my job without going insane. And then personally, you know, in my personal life, I'm kind of addicted to that feeling you get when you go from being completely new and horrible at something to being kind of okay and passable at it. Yep. You know, there's a transition point that feels really good right in there, where every step you're taking is like a huge improvement. So you get that like that dopamine boost every time you do a project.
Yep.
And then, you know, once that kind of tapers off, I tend to go find something else to learn.
It's funny. You sound exactly like me.
There's a lot of us. I think this community is comprised of people like that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think it's beautiful.
Learn to do a little bit, and once you're kind of comfortable with it, it's like, okay, ooh, what's this shiny thing over here? Yep. Absolutely.
I agree with you. I mean, that's also my favorite personally is that moment you step back after you finish a project and look at it and go, I did a thing. Yeah. And that completion process is just, and to watch other people, I can agree with you on that, to see them passionate about something that they've done, especially when you look at them and you know that they've got that look of 3, 4, 6 months ago, I couldn't have done this, and I did. And that excitement is addicting.
Oh, the best for me is when it's something that I think of as mundane, you know, and then I find somebody who's obsessed or passionate about it, and they can kind of like put a new spin on it, you know, or kind of reveal to me some reason why it's new and interesting. You know, I mean, it could be something like model trains. I grew up with model trains. I never would have thought they were interesting, but if I you know, you go to like the Detroit Maker Faire and there's a model train club there, and they can like show you like, oh, if you look at this car, it's got this design on it that only happened at this time and it makes this happen. And it's just like, I love that like shifting of perception from something being mundane into new and interesting because somebody was obsessed with it.
Yep.
Fantastic.
Yeah, that's and maybe see if you kind of relate to this. A lot of what drives the things that I end up interested in is the things I don't know. I don't understand how something works. Like growing up, I never really sat down and read like fictional books and stuff like that. Had no interest in that, but I would sit and read a manual for something, trying to figure out how it works or why it's not working is usually the case.
You mechanical junkie.
But that's, yeah, I could sit down, I could read a manual, but give me a fictional book and I had no interest whatsoever. Now growing up being an adult, that's changed a little bit more. I still don't sit down and read a book, but I'll listen to an audiobook. But yeah, it sounds, you see the thing you don't understand, and if it sparks that little bit of creativity, that's enough to kind of guide you in that direction to go deeper in it and get a little
a bit. I mean, I'm different in that I love fiction more than nonfiction, but when it comes to making things, yeah, I'm totally drawn to the things I don't get, that I don't understand. But when I was younger, I was a horrible know-it-all. I mean, I was insufferable. I thought I knew everything. And now I've learned at least that even when you think you know about something, if you go into it and just play dumb, sometimes people will surprise you and kind of turn your world upside down, and you maybe thought you knew something, but you didn't, right. Or you were wrong. And I think it's important that even like at Maker Fairs, even if it's something I think I know a lot about, I'll walk up and just let them explain, because you learn so much.
Yeah.
And most of them are extremely passionate about explaining.
Yeah.
I mean, that alone. I mean, I do the same thing. My wife does not let me go to as many Maker Fairs a year as I would want to, because by no means am I an editor of a magazine or anything like that. Your job just sounds so cool. I just don't have that ability. But when I go to Maker Fairs, it's like, oh, I want to do that. Oh, I want to do that. Oh, I bet you I could do that. Let's go learn a thing. So, I mean, Maker Fairs in general, other than the fact of people showing off what they could do, I think they're inspirational to people that are looking for things to do as well. I think that Maker Fairs have increased the number of makers every year that new people go and see them. I think more people are becoming makers just because of Maker Faire.
Oh, I totally agree. I started going to Maker Fairs before I worked for Make. And for me, it was really interesting because, I kind of, growing up, I always thought I was a little bit weird or a little bit different. Everybody thinks they're different, right? But whenever I went to a Maker Faire, and I got to say my first was probably, I don't even remember exactly now, maybe Kansas City, maybe New York. But I remember the feeling, though, of walking around and being like totally comfortable and at ease. And like everybody there was just like me in this one way that made everything jive, right? And that was, everybody there was interested in making things and was kind of obsessive about it a little bit in some way. And I felt like I found my people, like I was at home. And I've heard that now. Every Maker Faire I go to, somebody says that, and it rings so true. And you were talking about the inspiration, man. There's people that go to a lot of Maker Fairs. There's us editors, of course, that go to a lot of Maker Fairs, and then there are makers within the community that go to a lot of fairs. Like Joe Prusa and Matt Stoltz, and I'm trying to think of people in the 3D printing community, because this is a 3D printing thing. Joel and those people that go to a lot of Maker Fairs. I'm willing to bet everybody has, the day they leave the Maker Faire, like this list of inspirations that they want to carry out. Of course, you're only going to follow through with like a fraction of a fraction of a fraction
right.
of those. But yeah, there's always that list of Maker Faire inspirations.
Yeah, it's the very first Maker Faire we went to. My wife and daughters and I went down to Nova Maker Faire, the Northern Virginia Mini Maker Faire, which at the time was a mini Maker Faire. The last time we were down, they dropped the mini off the beginning of the name of it at that point.
Yep.
Oh yeah,
Um,
last year it was great.
once they moved over to that college campus, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah,
Um,
I
but
said they still need more space. They definitely need more space, but
yeah,
it's a good Maker Faire.
that was eye opening. It was kind of like you said, I had already been involved in the 3D printing community online and kind of starting to get to really know people on Twitter and Facebook, and had that small community. And man, we went to that first Maker Faire and it was like, holy crap, we are coming back next year. Before we even got through the day, we were going back the following year.
Yeah.
It was that simple.
Yeah.
And you left there, like you said, so inspired and such a list of things that you want to do, that you want to look more into or learn a little bit more about. And yeah, it kind of stinks that you only end up getting to do a fraction of that, because everything takes time, everything takes money, and you can only do so much. um, so the different one of the things we have now that's really changed from like when my grandpa was young and growing up and learning to do things and tinkering with stuff. Back then it was basically engines and tools, hand tools, things like that. You didn't have a lot of the power tools that we have now. um, Especially you didn't have things like 3D printers and CNC routers, laser cutters in your home, or even just nearly accessible, unless you had a job like a machinist or things like that, where you were working with a piece of equipment, but then you didn't get to necessarily tinker with that piece of
Mm-hmm.
equipment at that point. What kind of tools and equipment do you use in your hobby with at home type atmosphere in your maker space?
My personal makerspace in my home, I have a big wood router, like CNC router, big, like 5 foot by 12 foot. Um, I've got some woodworking tools, table saw, chop saw, all that junk. 3D printers. Right now, I've got an MK3S. It's right over there, kind of on my bookshelf here in my warm office here instead of out in my garage because it's cold out there. I've got a SL1 from Prusa. I've got a Cerambot, the ceramic printer. Let's see here. I've got a K40 laser cutter that's been modified and upgraded, and sewing machines, a computerized embroidery sewing machine. My engraving setup, which is pneumatic. It's specialized just for hand engraving. That's all I can think of off the top of my head. Then a bunch of general stuff, drills and saws and clamps and wrenches, and that's really all I can think of off the top of my head. Growing up, my granddad always had a wood shop where he would make toys, little wooden like trucks and a little bunny with a lopsided back wheel so it would look like it's hopping whenever you're pulling along and stuff like that.
Yeah. What out of all those things listed, what's the one that you find right now is drawing you to it the most?
Well, right now I'm on this kick where I'm learning hand engraving, so I'm using that the most. But it fluctuates a lot. Like a lot of people out there that tinker, I don't make my living from any of these skills specifically, so I don't have to settle into one. I use that CNC router a lot. When especially during the summer when it's warm and I can open up the shop and stuff, I end up using that a lot, even in other projects. So I'll use it to make a fixture for something else, or I'll make furniture to hold things. The CNC router from Avid CNC is just, man, I love that thing.
Yeah,
Uh,
CNC routers are a lot of fun. Not to cut you off, Matt.
no, you're good. Go for it.
Quick question for you. You've got 3D printers and engravers and stuff like that, and something I've noticed with being a maker myself, though I do agree with your earlier statements of it's name changing as we move along. Starting off way back with, that weekend workshop retired guy, to now we're just makers. Um, but do you feel that these machines specifically, not so much your like woodworking tools and stuff like that, though that they could be qualified, that your day-to-day basis stuff, when the like to hang up a picture or to fix something in your house, your brain, instead of going, hey, let's run to the store, oh, I can fix that with your machine. Do you think that happens more with being a maker than
Oh yeah. Oh
than
yeah.
it did beforehand?
And it's not just saving money, or I can do that, so much as sometimes it bugs me to have the same stuff as everyone else. Like I'll go into a store and look around at the stuff there, and it just kind of makes me feel icky to think that everybody else has the same one. I want it customized. I want it unique. And sometimes I don't have the time to take on a project to make something. So I'll buy something and bring it home and customize it.
Sure.
But, absolutely, all around the house, there's little things, even things like light switch covers that you would think, they're like 50 cents at the hardware store, but I could 3D print one, or, cut one out of wood, and then you have this unique thing. I mean, my house looks like a patchwork mess, but it's the way I like it.
But it looks different than everybody else's.
That's right.
It's like a fingerprint. No other house looks the same patchwork as yours.
Right.
And
Go ahead, Ron.
I see that you've just recently moved. I assume that when you moved, you decided to go to town with your redesign of your house. I mean, making a lot of brand new things. You have a lot of projects home side that you're planning on doing with the new place.
Kind of, but a lot of it's on hold. We did just move, and I don't have electrical set up for like my router and stuff, so it's just sitting there doing nothing. I've 3D printed a few things around the house, but this house is a more kind of traditional build than our old house. Our old house was a mid-century modern house built by a crazy person out of scrap. So it was already really wild and bizarre. So I was adding wild and bizarre things, and they fit visually. A big mechanical iris to open in between rooms to work as a window or whatever, kind of fit visually in that home. Whereas here, this is kind of a country, home, and it doesn't jive visually. So I'm doing smaller, more subdued things, a lot more woodworking. But most of my projects are centering around, as soon as it gets warm out, I'm wanting to do sculptural stuff in the yard. So a lot of it's just kind of waiting for the warmth.
I forget what I had on my mind to ask you.
Sorry about that.
Do you ever find yourself struggling with the over justification of why you can make it yourself instead of buying it at the store?
No.
You know how on social media and stuff, you see people, somebody posts a project that they 3D printed, and somebody goes,
just buy one?
"Why didn't you just buy that? You could have bought that."
No, I mean, I got over that years and years ago, because to me, it's kind of innate. It makes sense to me that you would make it instead of buying it, even if it cost more, for the reasons that then it's the thing you made. It's unique. You don't really look at like a picture frame and go, "Oh, my granddad bought that, I should hold on to it." You say, "Oh, my granddad made that,
right,
I should hold on to it," or "My grandma made that quilt," or whatever. And so I think I feel like it's kind of innate that reason is kind of built in, and the people who question it, they just don't get it, and that's fine. I've accepted it. It used to bug me early on. My biggest struggle is justifying the time and expense sometimes to support this, because I don't directly live off of my making things. So then, like we moved into this new place, and I'd really love a workshop, but I can't really justify the expense of building a new workshop because it's not really something I need. I don't survive off of that money. I do a few side like commissions and make a little bit of money, but not enough to pay for a new workshop, that's for sure. You know, so that's probably the biggest struggle.
Right. That's I know, you know, my wife will be shopping somewhere, she'll be looking at something, and she'll end up hearing, I can make that. And the list of I can make that's are way longer than any of the stuff I think that I've actually made. But yeah, it's for, when I think about that kind of stuff, you know, I I get really excited about that end product, whether it's 100% the way I envisioned it or it'll work. Like you get to that point of yep, it'll work in the place that it needs to work.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
I'll run upstairs when I finish something and show my wife, and she's just okay, honey. You know,
Well, yours does that too.
yeah.
I thought it was just mine.
Yeah,
Some
yeah.
things she has the same enthusiasm. Other things, it's okay. Good boy.
I'll put it on the fridge next to the kids' drawings. You
Yep.
go back to work.
Yeah, yeah, I get that too sometimes.
What's something you don't currently have that you'd like to in your arsenal of tools, or let's even go beyond tools or abilities?
Oh
What's something that
man.
interests you now?
I have to kind of keep myself in check because I'm in a position where I see a lot of cool tools, and I'm in a position where I could theoretically buy a lot of cool tools. So I have to kind of keep reminding myself, you know, that maybe I don't need them, and it's just that kind of tech lust. Like, you know, if you were into computers, every time the new video card comes out or the new Mac, if you're into Macs or whatever, there's a natural tendency to like feel like you need it and to start justifying why you would need it. And I've had to fight against that for years and years and years. Right now, like my K40 laser cutter absolutely sucks compared to like a modern one, like a Glowforge or a Muse or um, the Dremel one or whatever, you know, like the modern ones with the camera. It sucks compared to those, but it does the job. And I don't need a laser cutter for anything. I literally have no projects on my plate that need a laser cutter. So there's no reason for me to go buy one, but man, I lust after them. And it's just kind of a constant thing, right? So what would I love to add to my arsenal? Well, a better laser cutter. That's one, because mine sucks. Um, you know, right now I'm kind of eyeballing an iPad Pro because of this whole engraving thing. A lot of the engravers use an iPad Pro with Procreate to design their engravings, because you can get a very similar kind of feel to the engraver in terms of drawing and the arcs and how they work. And you can take a picture of something and then draw directly on that picture, um, to get everything right before you then do your engraving. So right now I'm kind of lusting after an iPad. You know, I would love to have a metal printer like that does laser sintering or something. I don't need one. I mean, I can't even think of what I would use one for, but man, I'd love to have one.
No, that's fair. And to go further into Matt's question, I'm sure that having with writing for make, you probably run across a lot of new skills, specifically that you want to learn. Do you have any future like what after engraving? Where's your brain going?
Woo, it's hard to predict. You know, I'm trying to slow down on that. I really want to get good at engraving, like to take it beyond that bare minimum viable product kind of skill set, that I've done for years and years and years. My goal right now with engraving is to actually get like good at it. Maybe, you know, maybe not amazing, maybe not master engraver or whatever, but I'd like to get good and hone those skills. But, you know, I got a tractor for the first time and I'm kind of like itching to work on that, like do mechanical stuff on that. You know, it needs the brakes done, it needs some other mechanical stuff fixed, and I'm kind of itching to do that. I'd love to do some plain old construction. You know, I'd like to build a greenhouse or a little barn or something. I mean, they're kind of boring things, but they're what's on my mind because of my current position in life. But what will probably happen though is I'll go to a maker fair. Like I'm hopefully going to maker fair in Kuwait in a few weeks, and I'll see something and it'll just hook in, and it'll grab those receptors in my brain, you know, that obsess over something, and I won't be able to stop thinking about it. And then this time next year I'll be like you know, embroidering portraits by hand or something. I don't know.
Talking about your engraving, how long you've been doing that for a little while now, right?
I think I've had the equipment for about a year. And there have been periods where I haven't touched it for weeks, and periods where I'll get in maybe you know, 2 or 3 hours in a week. So pretty minimal.
Right. Do you have any examples of your engravings at all? I know I've seen them on social media.
Yeah. I'm not in my workshop, but I do happen to have this one. I don't know if my camera will focus on it. I'm kind of blown out
There
from
you
the
go.
window here, but this is a little chunk of brass that I had sitting around that I used for practice, and it really serves no purpose. It's just a chunk of, actually I think it's bronze, but it's just practice, you know.
Now, what caught your interest to start going down that avenue? Do you remember?
I saw some coins by a guy named Sean Hughes. If you look him up on YouTube, he's got hundreds of videos, and he's just this he's kind of wacky. He's this guy that engraves coins mainly, and he's been doing it for years and years and years and years, and he's just obsessed with sharing the skill, showing people how to do it, showing people how to make their own little engravers and stuff. And I thought his stuff was so beautiful, and I wrote an article about it, and then I kind of let it sit for a while, and I just couldn't get it out of my mind. And so eventually I decided I had to try it, and I've been trying to get better and better at it since.
With this being technically a 3D printing stream, we should ask some 3D printing questions.
Yeah.
What was your biggest struggle getting into 3D print when you first got started with it? What's some of the stuff that you had the biggest? Now you've been doing it for a little while,
Yeah.
so the things people may experience now might be different. But
yeah, I think people's experiences now are very different than they were when I started, and I didn't start super early on. Let's see. I wrote about 3D printing back when the MakerBot cupcake was kind of fresh and new. That's when I started writing about it. So I was familiar with it, but I'd never actually touched one or seen one until I think I was doing a tour of a makerspace in Phoenix, Arizona, and Mohib, I forgot his last name, gave me a 3D printed skull and wrenches from Hackaday. I think that was my first 3D print, and I kind of tinkered with his 3D printer for a little bit, thought it was cool. Came home, some people had a cupcake that I got to play with, and you know, it seemed like back then you spent most of your time working on your printer. After that, I got we had a Mendel at the makerspace that we were working on for a long time. Never seemed to work long enough to print like whole things. It seemed like you'd get halfway through a print and then you had to fix something would come loose, you know, our wire management was horrible or whatever. And then I got a Lulzbot AO100, which was a Mendel design. And that was the first one I had in my home. And I remember first layer was a nightmare. You had to stand there and babysit your printer through the whole print. Back then it was all ABS and everything warped and it was a nightmare. And then I was surprised. I expected everything to come off beautiful because like this was several generations past the cupcake.
Right.
And I had seen these prints that Mohib was doing, which were perfect, you know, nice sidewalls, vertical, no elephant foot, nothing. And then I got this printer from Lulzbot, and I expected it to be more kind of a tool than a project. And it worked. It worked all the time. But like, you know, some of the corners would be rounded or there would be elephant foot. And I remember emailing him and being like, is this normal? Is this the way it's supposed to be? Or is mine broken? And they were like, no, that's the way it is, man. You got to really like constantly tweak it to get it where it needs to be. And now, you know, things are just magical compared to where they were. This MK3S, the Prusa, is just incredible, you know, in terms of quality, repeatability, the feature sets. I mean, I love it. I love it.
I when I got into 3D printing, I had rapid experience, like you said. You know, you were printing with ABS, and I wasn't as early as you were into it. I mean, heck, the Taz 5 or 4, whatever the one was before the 6 was out, like when I got into 3D printing. So I got in kind of in the middle of it. But I was in it to the point where, you know, you could get PLA, you could get ABS, and most of the other materials were pretty much out of reach except for nylon if you wanted to run weed whacker trimmer line.
Yeah, sure.
So it was one of those, you know, I made the choice when I first started. I printed with nothing but ABS on my Delta.
Yeah.
And it was mainly because of my mindset of, well, this one's not good in the heat. This one's a little bit better. So I'm going to go with this one because it's going to last a little bit longer in the heat or hold up a little bit better. And like you said, the frustrations, first layer, just the warping on the filament, just everything was a pain. And the worst part about it was, like, I refused to look at PLA. I looked at it as, oh, it's inferior to ABS.
Yep. I did very
like,
similar.
Now I have shelves upon shelves of filament that's mostly all PLA.
Yeah.
But it is now, I mean, I have no problem. I've sent stuff to my printer while I'm at work. I've modeled something for work, sent it to a printer, drove to my house, picked it up, taken it back to the job site, and started print and everything without ever even being in the house.
Oh, nice. Right? Nice.
It is amazing where things have come from.
Yeah, I went from that Mendel to a Taz 4, and that was a big step up. But that was back, you still had to level your bed manually and stuff. Yep. You know, that reminds me of a good topic on 3D printing. There are some people that insist that you should still have to build your printer from a kit, and you should still have to manually level your bed. I won't name any names, but there are people that are adamant that it's important that you still do those things manually, and I completely disagree. I think if you want to build printers, fine, that. But if you are the person who wants to use a printer as a tool to build other things, that we should have every convenience possible. What do you think?
I would agree with you on everything except for the manual bed. And only because I have not tried the later auto bed leveling technology where you get it close and then the printer figures the rest of it out for you. I was back with the original, like, contact sensors and conductive sensors, which I know they're still using, but they've gotten way better than 5 years ago when I first used it. So I forced myself on my Delta. That was a fixed bed. It was supposed to have auto bed leveling, but it was the original conductive probes, and horrible. That one I took and put springs under the bed, learned how to manually level, and that's the way I've done it ever since.
Sure.
I do have a newer bed leveling kit to put on one of my printers. I've got enough of them I can try it on one and either like it or not. But I do agree with you. I mean, we are at a point now where you can buy a $250, $300 printer that pretty much works out of the box. And
that pretty much part you have to watch out for.
It's the pretty much part, but I mean, like, print something like that pretty quickly.
Yeah.
3D printers are meant to be a tool. And I do agree with you. Unless you want to tinker and you want it to be a project, yeah, you don't need to build a kit for your first printer. I did. I chose to, but that was because, one, it was cheaper to do it that way. And two, I like to tinker, and I was okay with, you know, the electronic side of thing, the mechanical side of thing. A lot of people might be okay with designing something, but they're not okay with the electronic side of it, or just mechanical, you know, nuts and bolts. Some people just aren't as interested, or I don't want to say capable because that's not the right words, but
not their wheelhouse.
Exactly. Yeah, it's not their interest. They don't want to do that stuff. and I can appreciate that. They want this
Sure.
to be the tool to create the product.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm not saying there shouldn't be that stuff available, but I've literally heard people say, if you're gonna use the 3D printer, you should have to build it from scratch and you should have to level the bed manually, which I think is silly, because then I'm like, well, why reduce it to those two things? Why not say you should have to make your own filament, or you should have to code your own firmware?
Right.
Like, why choose those two specific things that you've decided you're going to draw the line in the sand? You know, it just seems silly, because that's what their experience was. But you know, if you're going to be a 3D printer designer and builder, sure, there should be a list of things you should have to do.
Right.
But yeah, I think.
Go ahead. Sorry, Caleb.
I was just going to say, I think for the general public, man, every convenience, as long as it works, bring it on.
Yeah, it's if you look at the old, you know, before we had makers or generalists, the terms to kind of identify people, you did have people who, you know, I'm a woodworker. Yeah, somebody could make it out of metal, but I'm going to make it out of wood. I think you've got that category of 3D printer.
Yeah.
And then you've got the more generalist. I want to be able to do everything. I don't want to rely on somebody else. But at the same time, I want to be able to do as many things as possible with the tools I have. I don't want to build my tool necessarily.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Like, you've got those two categories, and people who kind of float in between.
Yeah.
Definitely. What do you think, Ryan?
Well, I'm a geek. I don't really though I am a maker. I don't classify myself as a maker, because I design more stuff than I make. But I like to make everything. There's nothing that I consider out of my reach eventually. So I mean, I get the woodworking thing. I love working with wood. I've done lots of cabinets and shelves and all kinds of stuff, and I've got more wood tools than I've got 3D printers. Ergo, easier to get a hold of than 3D printers for sure. And I know how the wood tools work. Anytime I get a new 3D printer, it's all right, let's figure out what your kinks and bobs and whatever are, which is fun, but I know my saws work. I know my blades are sharp. I've used them enough times. I think it has more to do with your personal experience, depending on how you do stuff, and how you buy things. I think that has a lot to do with how you buy things.
Sure.
I mean, not to cycle you around, but my first printer was a kit. I bought a G-Tech printer a few years ago. It was a kit. And that was the worst possible mistake I could have made, because, I mean, my personal background for work is in IT. I build white box computers. I've done IT support, everything like that. I mean, very, very rarely do I come across a computer problem that I don't know how to fix. And I was like, I can do micro welding. I can solder on boards. I can do all this kinds of stuff. This is going to be simple. Got it. No problem. Yeah, I was wrong. So, I mean, buying a kit was a horrible idea, even for me, because of my background. But I don't think that there is enough that anybody in the community that has a social media presence can say to somebody getting into any field to convince them otherwise of buying a kit, because I don't think we know how to approach that specific subject yet without going, yeah, you're an idiot. Don't do that. You really don't understand. Because I mean, the maker community is full of egos, and they're big egos, and they enjoy to be stroked, but they really, really don't like to be told they're wrong. So I think that's a big issue that we run into when it comes to kits and stuff like that. Trust me, until I made the mistake twice of getting kits, no.
Yeah.
I still didn't learn.
I mean, I've got a kit, and with a Cerambot, I've currently got that kit. And I was just, back to the original thing, I was just surprised to hear people say that everyone should have to do this process, right?
Like, it's a rite of passage.
Yeah, I disagree. But you said something, not to change the subject, but you said something interesting where you said you don't consider anything outside of your skill set. And that's something I see with a lot of makers. Somebody will say, hey, can you build this? And right off the bat, most makers will go, yeah. Well, first I'll have to learn how to program in this language and how to make this and how to do that. But yeah, I could do that. It might take me a year or two. Do you guys run into that?
I just did that back at Christmas with I just got a K40 back in August and
Oh,
didn't
yeah.
really get to play with it until October, November and really start to learn it. But I designed my own rotary. I had done one that Wes Swain Geeksmithing had designed for his K40. Printed his, used his a little bit, and I'm like, okay, now it's my turn. I want to do it my way. So in an evening, I designed a rotary for the K40, and the very next day had orders for cups to
Oh,
laser
nice.
engraving. I hadn't even used it yet.
Oh, my goodness.
Like I had posted, I did a cup that even I wasn't happy with. Or just posted like, here's what I'm doing and posted it on Facebook for friends and family. And next thing you know, I wake up in the morning to a message, hey, can you do 6 cups for me?
Oh,
Like,
nice.
sure. And then afterwards, I'm like, crap, I got to figure out how to get this working.
Nice.
Well, yeah, I had kind of a unique childhood. My grandfather was a hell of a guy. I mean, a little bit old fashioned for the most part, but he was the guy that would pick. He would come over to the house, and the first thing he would do as soon as he got to our house is he would pick up dictionaries. I kid you not, he would grab a dictionary, and he would pull out a big black marker, and he would go through the dictionary and mark out words that weren't important. Specifically, quit and can't. I mean, he would mark them completely out of books, and he would tell us over and over again, the minute you say you can't do something, you've already given up. You will not know what you can do until you try. And as long as you're willing to learn, a day spending time learning isn't a waste. So if my mindset being there's nothing outside of my skill set, I want to and will be able to do whatever I try eventually. And that's, I think that's a great way to look at anything maker related.
Yeah. My dad had a very similar thing he used to tell us. Um, and I don't know if he came up with this on his own or not. And when I was a kid and a teenager, I didn't fully respect what it means, but I do now, and I try to teach my kids the same thing. My dad relied on my brother and me, and still does, for our technical experience with things, our IT side of things, writing software. I mean, he had my brother at 14 years old writing software for him to use then in the fire department for record keeping, customized software and things like that. And he would say, and he still does this to this day, I want this, or I have this problem and I want to solve it this way. And anytime you ever said I can't, or you can't do that, his response always was, it's you don't know how. It's not that you can't, you don't know how. And I've realized, like watching things like SpaceX and what they've done in the last 5 to 10 years in space exploration. You know, they were told you can't land a rocket. You can't bring one back in from space and land it. Well, it's not that it's impossible. You just don't know how. And I've realized, between I realized as I became a little bit older adult how wise my dad actually was in what he was telling us, you know, and I've realized, that subconsciously got ingrained in me. I don't know how to do something, and that's what interests me in learning how to do it. Because I would rather rely on myself than rely on somebody outside. Sometimes that comes back and bites me in the butt. I should have just relied on somebody, but that's what I've always been taught. So, Caleb, I know I told you I'd keep you for about an hour, and we're coming up on that. Real quick, do you want to tell everybody about a little over a year ago? is when we got the announcement of, or I guess a little less than a year, is when we got the announcement of Make Magazine or Maker Media shutting down. And of course, it was right around Bay Area Maker Faire.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I can talk about that.
Sounds like my noise is starting upstairs, so I may have to start muting myself. Do you want to tell us a little bit about, whatever you could tell us about what happened with Maker Media, and then where things are now, like kind of where that.
Yeah, I'd love to. Make has always been in a unique position in that we're such a unique company. Our user base is so unique, and we're so broad. We've always kind of struggled with how to make that into a profitable company. And we're located in our headquarters are in San Francisco, and I think a lot of this happened kind of before I came on. We took on a bunch of investors. So this would be like your San Francisco startup investors. So we had a board of investors that we were answering to, who expected a certain amount of growth and a certain rate, right? And you can imagine, these are the people that are used to like Uber and Twitter and things that grow at a certain rate with a certain amount of overhead that's very low. And we never were able to kind of supply that type of growth. We kind of always struggled with, all these different initiatives. Make did a lot of things. I don't think people were fully aware of everything that Make did. We had all the Maker Fairs, between 150 and 200 Maker Fairs all over the world. Most of those are kind of like franchises. We only ran 2 or 3, locally, like Bay Area and New York, and they were the big ones. We have the magazine. We have a books division that publishes educational books. We have a store where that's changed over time on what it sold. We used to produce kits, and then we did drop shipping. Anyway, there's a lot of stuff going on that comprised Make. It was this big hulk of a thing with a board of advisors that expected a certain growth rate. And we never really managed to hit that. And it was always frustrating because we were constantly having to pivot to try to appease the board and things like that. Now I'm pretty disconnected from all that. I work remotely from Missouri. I tend to be left alone to do my own thing on the creative side. So my perception of that might be a little bit warped. I always just kind of saw it as this unfortunate, painful thing we had to deal with. Whereas I'm sure some of my coworkers or my boss might see it differently. But ultimately what happened is they got sick. I think they got sick of dealing with us and infusing money. And we were faced with a tough situation where, like, Maker Fairs, like the Bay Area Maker Faire, it cost millions to put on, and we weren't able to have like the cash flow to put that out ahead of time to produce it, to then try to recoup the money back afterwards. People look at the ticket prices for the Maker Faire and the amount of people that attended, and they do quick math in their head and say, oh, you should have made a lot of money. But unfortunately, the reality is there are costs that they're not aware of, with licensing and with insurance, and the grounds themselves are super expensive, and then security and the tents and things are insane. You would never guess how much like a tent for an event costs, right? It's thousands of dollars for a simple tent, but you can't bring in your own because it's illegal. And then, a lot of tickets, you look at the total amount of tickets, a lot of those tickets we actually subsidize, for students and educators and makers. And then we don't charge the makers themselves to come display. Anyway, we weren't making money on it. It was a really expensive thing we weren't making money on. And eventually we were faced with, some tough decisions. Dale, the founder, decided it would be best to dissolve the company as it was, to let it just fold and go under. And then he would, out of his own pocket, purchase the assets, which is the name and the magazine and the Maker Faire. So Maker Media closed down, and Dale personally purchased the rest with quite an outlay of his own money, and hired back like 12 of us to try to reboot it. It's a painful process. A lot of people were unfortunately burnt in that process. We had sponsors for Maker Fairs that had already paid in that we didn't have money to pay back to them. Like, you can't just make it materialize out of thin air. So we're still working on deals to try to help like soothe that over and give people maybe free exposure, free advertisement that maybe they paid for before. And it's kind of a painful process, but we're climbing through it. And we're a leaner company. We're more agile. We're focusing now on the community more. Dale came to me and said, I want you to kind of think about, in the articles you write and the videos you produce, think about now what you can do that benefits the community, that highlights the community, that brings the community to the forefront of everything. So, instead of just this guy made this cool thing or this girl made this awesome thing, maybe profile the person more, or find out what community they're a member of and try to highlight that community itself. And so we've had this huge paradigm shift where we're trying to be more of a service to the community than previously, where we were kind of like feeling like we were like the leader of the community. Now we're kind of like stepping back and just trying to like, be a service and help to the community and resource, which I personally, I love the way it feels to be able to, highlight people and show them off and get them exposure. And it's fantastic. It's tough because sponsors don't want to pay as much for that as they did the other thing, because it doesn't bring as much traffic. You're not going to click on an article that says meet this person from Iowa as quickly as you'll click on an article that's like, this latest tech is here. Is it the end of the world? Like, that's just the reality of the way things are. So, we're having to take things a little slower and be a little more measured in our attempts, but we're back and we're focusing on the community, and it's awesome. We still got, we're publishing the magazine, and we've still got maker fairs. There are between 150 and 175 maker fairs all over the world right now, all franchises. We're not running our own at the moment, but we're talking about some stuff maybe in the future.
That's cool. Yeah. So like the whole thing happened with Maker Media, and it was like, this sucks. Like, just the fact that Make was now going to be gone.
Yeah.
And it was a few months later. I remember I saw something about Make Community, or I went to make.com, like out of habit looking for something. And I was like, what is this? What is Make Community? And I reached out to you on Twitter at that point and said, hey, what's up? Because I'd seen like there was a couple of videos that you did that were on the Make channel. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, what's going on? What did I miss here? Because like, this looks totally different. And I'm reading through stuff, and then you had gotten back to me and kind of gave me the gist of, basically Make, instead of, like you said, being at the top of the community, being the leader of the community, wants to just be a part of the community instead. Yeah. And just, kind of like here on the Friday night hangouts, we've had, when I started this, I had 25 subscribers on my personal YouTube account, and this channel didn't even exist at that point. At the same time that I was on there, we had Joel Telling on there with a couple 100,000, and now, I mean, where's he at now? He's quite a few 100,000 at this point. I don't know. Everybody kind of came down on that level playing field, and when I realized that's what Make is doing now. That's what this Make community is putting everybody. I love the fact that you guys are doing the spotlight on the community type of deal and showing off what people are doing and just giving them an outlet, sort of coming back down to a level place where everybody's on the same playing field.
Yeah. I mean, we're doing these things called Maker Spotlights, which are just like short profiles of individuals. Yep. And if I had 10 of those a day to run, I'd be happy, just to give everybody a chance at the platform. And not only as a service to that individual, but as a service to the reader, because there's so much now. How do you find what you're interested in? You go to YouTube and you're stuck with the YouTube suggestions, which I don't know about you guys, but like I'll have my feed like curated so it's nice, and then I'll click on one video
Yep.
that caught my attention that might be out of my normal, whatever, and then it'll flood my feed with that kind of video.
Right.
And then, I don't know. So I'm kind of doing it for both sides of it. I want people to be able to find what they're into, and then to give that maker also a step up, hopefully to get those followers.
Right.
Because, the rising tide lifts all ships.
Yep. Well, and that's exactly where the Friday night hangouts came from. It was I've created the mission statement in the last year or so, slowly kind of evolved into it. But basically, we say the mission is building the maker community through live streaming, because that's exactly how this started. It was a random one day. I said, "Hey, who wants to do a live stream on YouTube and just hang out and talk?" And from that day forward, it became a weekly thing for the last almost 3 years now. February will be 3 years we've been doing it.
Wow.
And seeing you guys doing that, we've had people who came on with no subscribers who are now in the tens of thousands of subscribers, and their initial exposure to the community and welcoming to the community was the Friday night hangout. It was just this getting around and chatting, and everybody was on the same playing field. Things have evolved a little bit since then, where we're doing these guest spotlights and interviews and stuff, or occasionally having a manufacturer on. But like starting this year, we went back to one of those streams a month will always be that, just let's hang out, no topic, wherever the conversation goes, it goes. So it's neat to see what you guys are doing, and at least what I envision this stream doing. Like just the two of those, the mission's kind of the same, to show off what people are capable of and introduce them to the community to grow it. It's really neat. And to give it, like you said, give them the resources as well. So you can come on here one day and talk to Joel Telling and ask him questions about how he got to where he is on YouTube. And the next day you can ask one of us who just made a movie prop. And that's the same thing you guys are offering with Make. And I think it's really awesome. I mean, I found you through Make and started following you on your personal YouTube channel. So it was really cool. I wanted to bring you on and kind of spotlight what you do and a little bit about who Caleb Kraft is. I know a lot of people have heard your name, so just through Make alone. Anything else that you want to tell everybody, Caleb, or Ryan, if you have any questions for Caleb? We're going a little bit over that hour since my technical difficulties starting things up. But yeah, Caleb, do you have anything else you want to tell everybody about who you are, where they can follow you?
Well, you can, like I said, you can always Google me, Caleb with a C, Kraft with a K. You'll find me. I use my real name everywhere. But really what you can do is go to a maker fair. Go support your local maker fair. The maker fairs are run by local individuals and local groups. So when you go to a maker fair, you're supporting us a little bit as a company, because of course it looks good for us to have maker fairs everywhere. But mostly what you're doing is you're supporting your local maker spaces, your local, educational, whoever's running your local maker fair. You're supporting them and you're helping grow your local community. And if you've never been to a maker fair, it's going to change your world. I promise. I mean, they're just amazing. Get your butt to a maker fair. You can go to makerfair.com. There's a map and a list of the upcoming ones. And we're constantly updating that. So check back and see if there's one near you.
Cool. Ryan, did you have any more questions for Caleb?
Not so much questions. Just a quick statement for you. I personally want to say that I think that the change for Make community is good. I do greatly appreciate that. Like you said before, back before the change, you were definitely leading the community in a direction, and even people that I know, because I have pointed out the Make magazine to a lot of people locally, it is a great resource if you, because I mean, there's something about a magazine. I mean, everybody gets magazines of random kinds. You like flipping through them, whether it be for whatever reason. You don't go to the computer for everything. And the YouTube feeds alone, like you were saying, get out of control, especially if you're like, oh, I'm going to go look and see what movies are playing. And now I've got all this crap I don't want to see anymore.
Yeah.
I don't care who said what about who in this video about a video or movie or whatever. And
Yep.
I get it. But I personally appreciate, and I think the rest of the community does, is that instead of leading the community, you guys have kind of stepped back, and instead of leading it, you're building it now. Okay, you're helping to sturdy up the foundation, if you will, of the community, and giving that that support that's needed. I mean,
Sure.
it's one thing to lead; it's another thing to support, and I think that is a hell of a step.
Yeah.
Excuse my language, and it's a good thing.
Yeah. I mean, I can't. This is not like an official company line. You know, we saw ourselves as leading the community before, but I personally feel like the community has grown so much that we weren't leading anymore. And so it's at this point in time, what we're doing is maybe accepting reality and taking the role that needs to happen, which is to support the community that's now bigger than us.
Right.
Now, I don't know if that would be an official company statement. I don't know how my boss would feel about me wording it that way. Maybe he'd like it. I don't know. But that's the way I kind of see it myself.
Cat.
Yep.
No, that's fair. And I mean, that there were times back before, not saying that you would see the magazine and be like, oh, it's leading the path. It was one of those, this is definite. Some magazines were interesting along the lines of, oh, I'm kind of interested in this project or this thing, and then it's like, not really. I'll look at it later. But the spotlights are intriguing. I really enjoy them, actually.
Yeah, I love doing them. Now, of course, we still do bleeding edge, but we try to make it bleeding edge within the community, you know? So like in the magazine, especially, you'll see new tech, you know, reviews of new tech, and we'll find and write articles about like the cutting edge of what the community is doing, right? So we're not ignoring the whole idea of leadership, but we're trying to do it in more of a way that supports the community and rises the community up.
Right. No, I get it.
Go ahead, Ron.
I know we're kind of winding down. There was another question I had for you. I was making notes. Do you? I know you enjoy writing and stuff like that for the magazine. Do you do any other writing in relation to maker stuff that isn't specifically on that platform, or is that where you're dedicated?
I've done guest articles on a few other blogs, you know, writing about virtual reality or sharing old retro science fiction book covers. I've done the science fiction stuff on Boing Boing, and I did some stuff on VR, maybe on Upload VR, I don't remember. But mostly I'm at Make. If you go to makezine.com, that's where most of the blog posts, or all the blog posts are. And then of course you can find me on the YouTube channel. But for the most part, I mean, I do some writing for fun, but I don't publish my fiction writing. Most of it's just sitting on G drives doing nothing.
Fair enough.
All right. Well, I would like to thank Caleb for coming on, being a guest on F3D and just kind of hanging out here for a little bit over an hour, answering some questions and telling us about himself, telling us about Make. Caleb is on all the social medias pretty much, right, Caleb?
Yep.
And you can find him, Caleb Kraft. Follow him. He's always doing something interesting. I mean, looking at even just the metal engravings that he's doing by hand. I mean, he's not using necessarily. What do you use for that? You said pneumatics.
Yeah, it's basically like hammer and chisel, except that the hammer is a little piston. So you can hold it with one hand, and then you can hold your piece with the other hand and engrave. So there's no computer, no stepper motors, no programming. It's like drawing by hand.
Right.
I needed a skill that was not computer related for my own mental health.
Yep. But yeah, so you can see that kind of stuff that Caleb's doing on social media. You can also follow him over at make.com, the Make community.
Make.co. There's no end.
Make.co. Yeah. Make.co.
Yeah.
That's right. Follow him over there and see what Make community is up to. And of course, you know, as we want to help expose people to our community and grow the community, that's exactly what Make community is doing. They're growing the maker community and giving people more connections, you know, more putting more people at your fingertips to potentially ask questions to when you're trying to learn how to do something. With this being a 3D printing live stream and platform that we've got here, you know, everybody has that common interest in 3D printing, or at least utilizing 3D printers to do something else. And there's a lot more beyond that. You know, there's people who know electronics better than those of us who do 3D printing. There's people who know woodworking and integrating 3D printing with woodworking. Make community is putting them at your fingertips to be able to get in contact and, you know, just have more people that you can reach out to and ask questions and get information so that you can learn more and grow the community at the same time. So thank you, Caleb, for taking an hour out of your Sunday here to meet up with us and hang out for a bit. If you'd ever like to come back and join us on one of the Friday night hangouts where we have the panel, let me know. You're always welcome to come join us as one of our panelists for that as well.
Maybe.
Or if there's somebody that you see that you think, hey, you know what, it would be neat for F3D PCH to get this person on, let us know, and we'll be sure to get you on the panel too to help ask questions for those. All right. You're always welcome to come and join in and hang out. Just for an update for everyone, the next live F3D PCH is February 7th. We have Scott Latine and Lulac, the main developers and testers of Marlin firmware for 3D printers, coming on to talk about the new Marlin 2.0 that they just released officially back in October or November. Marlin 2.0 came out of beta, and they're coming on to answer all your questions about Marlin and also to tell you what's new and why you should run Marlin. The next open hangout is February 21st at 10 p.m. Eastern. Again, the open hangouts, there is no set topic for that. We're all just going back to the roots of the stream and just hanging out, and the conversation flows in whatever direction it flows in. So if you would like to follow the Friday night hangouts, go to f3dpch.com. There's links out to all the social media, as well as a place to sign up to join the open hangouts. There's a place to recommend people that you'd like to see us interview or get on as panelists, so that I can see where our viewers want to go and who they want to talk to. There is a Discord server as well. If you just go to f3dpch.com/Discord, it'll take you right to it. And of course, if you'd like what we do here at F3D PCH and you'd like to help support the operating costs of F3D PCH, if you go to patreon.com/howidoit, which is my Patreon, all patrons on there, their money goes towards funding F3D PCH. So that's how you get access to the Meet the Maker interviews like we're doing here with Caleb tonight, or this morning. Sorry, I've been up for a very long time leading into this whole interview. If you'd like to be able to join in the chat, like today we had Mike NLTMW in the chat on YouTube. He's been in there just commenting along with it, and you can be a part of these live streams. And these are a little bit smaller than what the regular public ones are, so it's a little bit more personal and a better chance your questions will get asked and answered. So that's pretty much it. Ryan, do you want to go ahead and tell everybody where they can find you?
I'm Geek Tech. Patreon, YouTube, Twitter, the name's all the same. I'm fairly sure that I pop up in Google now, so Yeah, I'm fairly easy to find. Uh, the same name everywhere. I didn't get too complicated with it. Um, I do lots of different maker things and techie things, and there's a reason it's called Geek Tech. So, yeah.
All right. Thanks, Ryan. Okay. Thank you to everybody on Patreon supporting the streams. Thank you to everybody who tunes in regularly to any of the F3D PCH content. We will see you again February 7th with Scott Latine and Lulac. Caleb, thank you again for joining in. And like I said, you're always welcome to join us anytime you'd like.
Thank you for having me.